inviting me. At this position, I must say that I'm not representing only Wroclaw, so 1 million agglomeration in the central Europe, but also 50 metro regions in all of Europe as the president of METREX. There is Henk Bowman with me today, and we are trying to share our point of view from that perspective, the wider one. Of course, the closest is that one from perspective of my city, but let me start with some reflection that for last 200 years we had different approach and perspective of planning, and it was all about getting healthier and rising the dimension and the level of well-being for our inhabitants. So of course, then firstly we start with this strong impact of modernizing the European cities and big change in planning. It led us to efficiency, to longer life, better productivity, and of course efficiency. It was all about economical impact. Then we have several changes in philosophy of planning, and we observe it as a 1,000-old city, and those agglomerations I'm talking about, and we have that huge and long perspective, and we had some kind of silo thinking of site development. So this effect about getting healthier and rising the level of well-being was like side effect from planning and from changing this environment. And from that perspective, we also as a city and as those metro regions I'm representing today, we know we are very centered about this, that the health as one of the 70s UN SDGs position is one of the key value and key position that we have to put in the center. So health as a driver for metropolitan development is one of our already set expert group that we are working on some kind of policies. And because of being part of METREX, we are like living lab, and we are trying to put those dimensions of different activity into action and try to test how it influences, how it impact on how it can contribute to healthier environment. So we change like quality of planning in very diversified dimensions of public space, transport, food safety, of course, housing and energy, climate change, air pollution, and so on. Of course, in order to have this huge insight, how it affects the health and well-being of our residents. So this is kind of complex approach that we are trying to represent, and we are trying to show not only across our organization, but also other partners that we have. So when we consider those examples, Wrocław is changing because of pandemic, because of those times we are living in, is changing. It's the most strategic and crucial document. It's a study of spatial development. So it is something that creates all strategies, social, economical, transportation system, residential, and it has great impact because we put health and well-being in the center, one of the key values that we are considering to be key players in this huge change. And when we consider other regions of metro regions in Poland, so we have in the Basque Country, we have Utrecht, we have Viken, including Oslo and Greater Helsinki, that in all those regions, health professionals are in planning this process and in planning approaches. So it shows that we change completely our philosophy and point of view, not only here in Wrocław, not only in strategic documentations and those papers that will have influence for another 20 or 30 years, but also for constant change, for something that will remain after our, election one or the second one. This is completely different point of view, and it refers also to this system of communication and between inhabitants, universities, business, all stakeholders that are involved in changing processes. And it has its practical approach, of course, in planning, which is crucial also from perspective of Wroclaw and metro regions I mentioned. So we must understand that it is strategic, and we are trying to share this knowledge about holism and humanity, that so maybe it is about promotion and health and well-being. It's kind of put in a central place in policy of development and metropolitan development and planning system. So from that perspective, it's certainly not an easy task, but it gives us opportunity to implement the good change for long term. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Could you tell us, in your capacity as president of METREX, but also as deputy mayor of Wroclaw in Poland, what is going to change in the planning process if we want to achieve the other objective just than simple growth or sustainability, and go slightly beyond this concept?
Certainly, it will. We just ended another meeting about this because we are part of a working group by our government. So we are trying to, first of all, make more stakeholders in this process, put professionals, especially those connected to healthcare and well-being, into this process, have impact on bigger involvement of communities and the local societies in order to be a part of those who are in charge. Of course, it has to stay in professional hands. What is the biggest change is that we have completely different imagination about our cities or our regions, and put it in holistic, in very complex dimension than we had like 3 or even 2 years ago before pandemic. Now it's speed up, it's kind of acceleration of modernizing our strategies and crucial documentation. So I believe in 3 or 5 years from now, we'll have completely different point of accessibility to have access and influence of changing those crucial elementary documentations that we are creating now together with society, together with professionals. So we are trying to involve all 70 aspects of well-being and health, and put it together. From those pragmatic one and practical one, we certainly do have to change our approach to logistic and systematic system of healthcare that is now inefficient in many ways, and it can be more accurate to needs that we have. It's about demographic changes that everyone is experiencing nowadays in Europe. So changing those different plans that we had like 5 years ago into modern one in order to have those very important and priceless sometimes assets, let me put it that way, on board for longer in order to have them healthier, happier, and in order to have this demographic situation in progress. So we, as a city, we are rising a couple of thousand every year, but we know a lot of cities that they have problem with the depopulation. So it has changing so many aspects of our life that probably we cannot imagine what can happen in 5 years as we can get back with our imagination 2 years before that day. So we are prepared to expect unexpected, of course.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you to Henk Bowman for having put you in contact with us. We will come back to you later on other business. Robert Olivier, you stay here, you listen to the 3 presentations, comment from your point of view, which is mobility. The mic. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, thank you for letting me speaking in that event. First, when I start to let me say that I fully support the program of the city of Rosario, a beautiful city I visited a few times when I was a visiting professor in Cordoba. My point will be about, you know, when COVID came, it did not stop everything. So people seem to think that many things have stopped completely, but it's not true. As I was thinking about it here in the city of Montreal, during that time, nothing had stopped concerning the impact of mobility. And certainly mobility to health, it was a greater aspect to be concerned. So the city implemented its mobility policy to make sure that things were going on. First of all, there was the creation of a mobility services to help and implement all the design that were made by the urbanism, and to make sure that things were not falling apart or did not follow through to the whole. So there was a few objectives that were very clear. Implement active mobility more than ever, upgrade security for pedestrians and cyclists, reduce pollution, and make transportation greener by using more electricity, which is one of our great things that we have here in Canada. The measures that were taken were, to me, quite important but different. I'm just gonna say some to you. First, we had a lot of bicycle pathway, but we installed an express network covering the island, which is a permanent one. So even in the winter time, it's going to be all the time accessible. And we had a lot of snow, as some of you may know. We also implement an upgrade in the public bicycle system. We introduce also to help people who has mobility problem, introduce electric bicycle also. So that's helped a lot. We make some intervention on the street where the 30 kilometers was implemented a lot also with the 50 kilometers that was already done. The people were quite happy and respected very much. There was reduction spaces, parking spaces were reduced. And there was a lot of attention concerning the big parking lots to reduce the heat island aspect. There was also, at the same time that we installed the bicycle express network, we wider a lot of sidewalks to favor local economy. So we want people to use more the closer economy, the closer facilities they have near home by walking more. There was still support for public transport, even though there were less people using it, but there were lots of money that were not coming through. The revenues were lower, but it was quite important for the city to encourage people to use public transport and make sure that it was a safe thing to do. Because as the last study was done, it was about 30-minute average people walking when you were using public transit. So that's a good way to keep health without thinking I'm going to have a walk outside and doing things. No, you just do it normally. And the electrification of public transport was turned around very much. So there was even a policy to buy, only thing that we're buying now for public transport is part of it, electricity. So my reflection after that is that what's coming up now? And that's the thing that seems to be difference between all the partners that are speaking about public transit right now. First, what will be the impact work from home? As Fernando said before the presentation, a lot of people thinking about working, instead of going to work office 5 days, they're going to go for 3 days, 2 days, or something like that. So what will be the impact? Because if people are using less public transport, is there will be less financing for public transport? Who knows? The other thing is that right now, if another aspect is delocalization of the industries. With the pandemic, there were a lot of new facilities grew up outside the CBD. So if that will be still continuing or not. So if it is, it will be reducing the large usage of public transport to CBD, and to have to rethink completely of a new radial system for public transport, which is not existing right now. Service offer is something that it's under discussion about all around the world. So with the less money to come in the system, and maybe a way that we're not sure who's going to be coming back, lots of cities try to avoid to put some more money in the system and even reduce the amount that they were putting on. So this is a real challenge that for every one of us to believe. Financing public transport is another challenge that we're facing right now. Governments are putting a lot of money to start up the economy, but sometimes they forget that if there's no public transport, the economy has difficulty to start because people have to move. We have to move goods also. So don't forget that, and we have to keep the pressure on the governments for those financing support for public transport. And that comes through one reflection. When you're a government, you want to introduce new system because it's very nice for public, for publicity to say that your government is doing things, but there's a lot of maintenance that not have been done right now on the services that we're offering and all the infrastructure that we have not to forget. So it will be to have a real arbitration between what's going to happen with all that money that will come, on what part of the system that money should be put on. And finally, I think as a society, we should insist and push on a lot on the role of active mobility for the future. As far as active mobility is concerned, the more you have, I think it has a direct impact on health system, because people are moving, people are taking new habits, and it's available to all types of people using transportation, every ages, with the electric bike now, the regular bikes and everything. I think that's a reflection we will have to have.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Albert. Thank you very much. Your point is taken. Could I ask Idoia Postigo, from your point of view, which is for me, I believe is also for you, Bilbao, what do you retain from from earlier presentations, and where you have done something different and that had taken you to another totally different direction than the other municipality or local authorities that we heard previously?
Okay, thank you for your question, Michel. There are slight differences between what has been presented up to now and the role of BM30, because we are a public-private partnership, non-for-profit, and we have nearly 140 members, including public institutions and private enterprises and social organizations in metropolitan Bilbao, which is in the Basque Country, north coast of Spain. But I said there are differences between what has been explained up to now, because the presentations that I've heard in this Congress are mainly focused on actions and plans already being carried out. However, BM30, our organization, works more on the long-term strategy. We are not executive. Our role is more to be a think tank, to give to our members the opportunity to have a neutral forum in which they can share a vision for the future of our metropolis. So I've taken for this conversation, in fact, I would like to congratulate you on the subject of the Congress, Take Care of Your City, which I think is quite appropriate in the context we are living after or during the pandemic, I have to say. And I would like to share very briefly some of the main lines that are part of our strategic reflection that could be complementary to those that have been put on the table by the people talking before me. So one of the main elements could be to approach the urban space as a human and social environment. And that means we have to deal with density, because I think that when the pandemic arrives, there were some voices that put in question the fact that health was against density. However, I would like to think that after these months living with the COVID, we've learned that we need density, we need this human and social environment to give answer to the main human needs in a sustainable way. And on the other hand, we have learned also that social relationship is essential as a human need also. So that would be my first point. Secondly, I think we have to count on new economic models. I think my other presentations have focused on this element to create quality employment and also to reinforce the common good. Because we need the affirmation of principles and clear ideological bets in favor of cohesion, but not in a palliative way or just for specific groups. We need to address the root causes of inequalities in our cities. Thirdly, we have to promote governance as a management model and to encourage citizenship participation in the co-creation of the city, because we are all protagonists and responsible for the decisions that affect our lives. In fact, the decisions made about the places we inhabit not only have a direct, real and concrete impact on the urban space, but they also have the ability to define how we live. So it's essential to include citizenship in the co-creation spaces of the city. Fourth, we need to guarantee the social co-responsibility of care. You have mentioned take care of the city. And I think as a society in global terms, we have to provide a social response to care needs, involving the institutions, companies, and people in general from an equal and co-responsible treatment between men and women. Fifth, I would mention the promotion of a sense of belonging and identity, because I think we used to move before the pandemic, perhaps more than ever, but that doesn't mean we don't need any identity linked to the place in which we live. So the place we inhabit offers us anchoring, belonging, opportunity, connection, and inspiration. And we need to keep that in mind also. Another factor will be the healthy city. I think some presentations have focused also on this aspect, and we must jointly reflect on issues such as increasing the forest mass of cities, producing cleaner air, the complete eradication of the private combustion car, and the introduction of the use of the water cycle, among others. And to finish my answer to your question, Michelle, I would like to add the importance of psychology in the urban environment in two aspects. One, because the city influences me and I influence the city. And in fact, the influence of the urban environment on mental health has been put on the table during this pandemic. And secondly, we have the personality of the city as if it was a human being, right? Because they are places capable of achieving their objectives, and they are places that are not able to get what they think, like in people. And we have to address these aspects and see what is under the fact of ambitious cities, ambitious in a positive way, that are able to get their objectives. And however, there are urban spaces that, because of this shared personality, have added problems to get to this point. I think I've been respectful about the time you gave me, but anyway, I'm willing to answer any other question from the public or from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Idoia. You too, you introduced new concept. It's quite new concept to the discussion, and I think this, particularly the mental health and how the structure, the built environment can help, or being influenced also by mental health. It goes both ways. Alexandra, you also work for a private organization. Strelka is private, huh? If I'm right. You were present at 2 o'clock. So what do you return from the presentations, and do you want to question the presentation or what they said, or do you want to add something to the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much, Michael, and all the speakers for the invitation and to this discussion. Well, of course, on the one hand, we heard today a lot of points that are, I think, key points to all of our context from where we are coming. And actually, I would like to also share some insights from the Russian context. On the one hand, I'm coming, yes, from the private company, but on the other hand, it's the largest urban consulting in Russia. So we work a lot with different cities of Russia, starting from Far East to the south, and with the northern cities and the European part of Russia too. So the contexts are very large, but for us, the questions of ecology to all the projects that we have at the moment in our cities are quite crucial. It is something that is still to be very much fixed, and in a lot of Russian cities, talking about zero waste principles or even regenerative design. This is something where we are still behind, and I guess not only us, but many cities would also support this thought that we really need to think about this more in a more detailed way. On the other hand, I'm just coming from the center of Siberia, Krasnoyarsk, which is a city, sometimes we call it the city with the black sky, because there is so many productions, industries and factories there, which really influence the atmosphere where people spend their daily lives, something we really start to look over within our urban projects. The second point, I've heard that something which really reflects to our context is a talk about mobility. So on the one hand, we develop a lot of different types of transport, also the light mobility, the individual mobility. So now in Russia, we're building the first ever velo route from Moscow to St. Petersburg, of course, more for velotourism reasons, but still hoping that this will influence our velo culture, and we could use bicycles in our cities more. And now we can see that a lot of big number of population in different Russian cities, they start to use different scooters and things like this. And we actually meet a new challenge of regulating this, because this also leads to some of the questions. And the third thing is housing. I think a lot was said about affordable housing, and I really would like to refer to Silva, who said in the beginning that housing is still perceived as something as a product from a free market, although it's a need of people that we really need to take care of, maybe publicly. And also to Idoia's speech just now, that we are the city, where we live influences us, and we influence the city. And maybe I want to catch up and share a few slides just for a few minutes, if you don't mind, just to illustrate the housing thing in Russia, maybe the specificities. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thanks. So on the one hand, we understand that urbanization in general is a very trending process, and in the world, it's according to UN, it's more than 60% living in cities already. But talking about Russia, we're almost 75% who are living in cities today. So we're quite an urbanized country. And thinking about how much time actually people spend in closed spaces and also at their homes, it's almost 70% of the day we spent in closed buildings, in transport, and also due to the pandemic and COVID, this tendency is straightened so much. And we understand that, what is connected to that is that 1 of 2 deaths are actually related to unintentional injuries in the world, which occurred at home, but also some researchers say on psychological health, say that there is so much more risk, like 22% higher risk of mental illness among dwellers who live in a very dense and very high rise and high density environment, very intensive use of land. And then due to the World Health Organization research and health guidelines, almost 5% improved mental health of British households in the buildings which use natural materials or modern technologies to kind of lower the impact of the harmful environment. So what's talking about Russia, we are having this kind of image in mostly all of our cities at the moment. It's 77% of our housing stock. It's typical houses made in the industrial era of 20th century, in the second part of the 20th century. And this image exactly from the first industrial wave is more something like 50% of all housing stock in Russia. It's like every second family member or friend of a family member, they are living in this type of houses, or some of your family members may live in these neighborhoods. And then only 25%, according to our own research, of Russian households and citizens feel comfortable in their apartments at the moment, where they have at least a room, a spare room, which they can have for their own or to share with their partner. And then 1/3 of this Soviet mass housing is now worn out and really requires major repairs. And we're now facing this great challenge. Maybe this is a very specific situation to Russia as a country, but talking about existing housing, I think every country has its own approach. And for us, we are facing a big challenge. What should we do with this outgoing housing, 50% of built homes that we have on the territory of our country at the moment. So now we're experiencing the moment that we have just a few methods of working with it, and most of it is demolishing it to the zero and then building new buildings on the place of these older houses. And coming back to the questions of ecology, of zero waste, of regenerative design, this might look not as the most effective way. So we're trying to propose new solutions now of modernization these buildings rather than demolishing and updating the land with new buildings which might be even higher, with some of the specific architectural solutions that would actually allow people to have a place to gather together. For example, new rooftops as collective spaces for recreation and communication, or special front gardens for dwellers who live on the ground floor, and even to update the apartments which they have inside with the second skin of these buildings to larger the rooms, which are quite small because they were built for special needs in 1950s. And then it was more important, the amount rather than the quality of the space itself. And due to some researches, we find that people, especially elderly people in Russia, they don't have much opportunities in cities to talk to each other, to have communication, they feel lonely. So we thought that maybe this kind of solutions may bring a new quality of life to our elder population, but also to all the residents of these houses, which is every second citizen of Russia. So in general, I think, just to wrap up, I think that methods that were shown in presentations today are very kind of strategic level and very kind of to the point, and they also are localized for each city in their own way. But general principles are there, and Sylvain started actually with the thesis with the argument that actually we have set our goals 30 years ago and still not there, achieving them, and maybe we can fix the most important ones and try to get there as sooner as possible, because the planet really changes and we feel it on our own daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Just one question. Have you made an assessment of the cost of constructing the new housing instead and demolishing and constructing new rather than regenerating the old and constructing less new building?
Yes, of course. We have also supported this kind of research, which actually we have a separate website on, we can forward later. We have supported it with the economical assessment. And of course, for different cities, depending on the cost of land, it will be the different outcomes in terms of economic efficiency. But also we think that this might be a collaboration of private developers and governmental regulations, which may, for example, for this type of more ecological way of taking further the housing in the cities, could actually give some financial, some organizational mechanism which would help private developers to realize these projects, to bring public good rather than just to, you know, take money from the land they are working on.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Alexandra. Marie, you arrived right on time. So it is your
Am I?
It is your turn now. Okay, what do you learn from this morning, and what are the complementary analysis or elements to introduce into the discussion based on your personal expertise?
So thank you, Michel. I think that what has been expressed till now is common to all our cities and countries. In Paris, in Greater Paris, in France, of course, we have seen that the COVID crisis and the disease itself stroke more poor people and poor districts and poor territories, adding kind of a new discrimination to others. There were also initiatives, of course, there are initiatives taken to help and try and improve the situation. The examples given by Lisbon or Rosario or other cities are very interesting, and I think all over the world there are people involved in doing so. The situation is indeed very critical, even in a country like France, where social rights are quite powerful. But for the first time during the crisis, we saw lines of French students waiting for food distributions, which for a country like France is a real problem. Maybe I would like to comment, starting from the question of health, central to this moment of the Congress, to comment about various dimensions which are tackled, but maybe insist a little bit more about housing and what was shown and explained by Alexandra from Moscow and other places is very relevant. The problem we have as far as social housing is concerned, but even as housing in general is concerned, is that now in many countries, the price of land and the price of flats and houses is becoming completely disconnected from real economy, and that the flats and houses are transforming into financial products. So this is really a big issue, because to try and change things, and especially have better housing conditions, which obviously has a strong impact on health, local authorities or government must be in a position to regulate this. And to a certain extent, I think in many metropolis, things have gone out of control. Recently, some months ago or years ago, I saw broadcast where a journalist was in London, in I don't know, beautiful western district of London, and he was discussing with the man who was sitting in the middle of the street, and he said, "But aren't you afraid for a crash, an accident with the car?" And the gentleman answered, "No, no, because here there is nobody comes anymore, nobody lives." And they were beautiful, you know, they were those mansions, white mansions, London style. But now they are not even inhabited by very rich people, but they change from hands to hands because they are considered as a financial secure product. So the relation with the real estate market, and even more than that with financial markets, is a big issue. This also takes us to, maybe I want to comment a little bit of the question of scales from city centers, dense area, peri-urban, rural areas, metropolises, regions, and all that. I think it's very important not to oppose areas, one area to others. I don't know how it is in our colleagues' country, but here is the time, and I think it's rather international, of kind of metropolitan bashing after metropolitan glorifying. And I think it's more interesting to try and approach things and issues by the links that obviously exist. A metropolis cannot exist without countryside, and to a certain extent, the other way around is true. So I think that what we need is to take into account the different scales and try and see what links and circular feedback can exist. And by doing so also, and maybe I shall end by this, also take into account the different dimension of public policies, because it's common sense, or it's almost obvious to say that we are experiencing a total crisis worldwide. It's social, it's economic, it's moral, it's ecological, it's societal, it's diplomatic, it's every level. And faced with this, public policies, either by local authorities, government, but also action from civil society in all its components, must articulate this dimension, because of course we can have and we must have initiatives for health or housing or whatever. But as our colleague from Bilbao, I think Idoia, commented about governance, if we don't have these links between the different policies and actions, of course we cannot overcome the situation if there are not jobs for people. It's very difficult, and those people enter a cycle where it's more and more difficult having housing, having access to health and all that. So I think that it's really urgent and essential to make the link between social, economic, and let's say ecological issues to try and find a way out. So I would say both taking into account the different scales and taking account the different scope of issues we are faced with. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.
Muchas gracias, Maria. Thank you very much for this presentation, particularly drawing attention to the level and to the connectivity between the different institutions, administrative or decision-making level, or even just the key players which are different. Thank you also for drawing attention to the cost of metropolizations and the diffusion of urban development to the medium-sized cities or small cities that we have been witness in Europe and in France in particular. We have to explain the phenomenon, and that is something that we can discuss maybe with your friend from METREX, the relation between the metropolitan and the hinterlands of those metropolitan. There is a dimension which has not been addressed, I think, at all qui a addressed at all in our discussion is the question of culture. What could happen to culture in a post-COVID city? Helle, you had some views on that.
Yeah. Okay,
yep.
I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, it's I'm very happy to be in this. It's nice to listen to everyone. I'll do this shortly, but actually we just inaugurated I think a very necessary project, a research project, which actually try to combine or integrate planning and health. And I think we call it the urban health culture of the future. It's about guidelines for cohesive communities, social inclusion, empowered citizens. I'm a practitioner, a researcher, but also representing a welfare society. And in these times, I think maybe we are a little bit spoiled. I always say that when I'm talking to everyone else. But still, I think in this discussion about urban culture and health, I think it's a discussion about make things happen. So we actually got a huge foundation from a local company here initiating this project. It actually started in 2019. We had a big meeting in Moscow actually in 2019 as well in September. And now it's actually started by an organization which is interdisciplinary. And I think for the innovation of all the challenges we are facing, I think we have to be interdisciplinary. We cannot solve things just within our own profession. And that's why I like INTA as well. And that also make it possible for me to raise a think tank with representatives from universities, 3 universities in Denmark, actually going into mental health, physical health, and social health. And I think this holistic approach, according to the interdisciplinary, is also something we need, because we have for many years discussed things in columns. So we are actually applying mental, physical, and social health into an integrated discussion about planning issues and behaviorism. Because I think we actually sometimes leave out the potential of talking about how we can actually nudge people to do something through very small issues. And then the project is tempting to be proactive. It's we have to promote, we don't have to prevent. So I think there's some issues there, which is actually basically quite interesting. And actually we are now we just recently had the first workshop. Larsson is also representing municipality and Malmö, which is very, very qualifying. Also because I think that health is everyone's business. Actually, we as practitioners, as well as municipalities, as well as researchers, managers, etc., we all have to make it happen. So actually, the idea of this project is throughout the next year through international research cases, create toolboxes and pilot projects. So we also work with 2 municipalities in Denmark of 2 different scales to make sure that we have some pilot projects that actually can act as inspirational areas. Of course, there is a strategic level. I like the idea of the Bilbao project as well, because the instrument of being strategic is really much a question about making politicians take in health as a political issue in their planning. as normally in Denmark, they say every time we talk about health, it costs money because it's a right in Denmark. So they try to avoid it. So we have to use another rhetoric. We have to use another way of talking about this issue. So I think the project is actually also parallel to another one about safety. So it's as many have been taught. I actually came in quite late. Sorry. But I think the social neighborhoods with cheap housing or better cheap housing, equity, diversity, but especially to achieve quality of life. And I think it's not only a question about creating social environment, it's a question about all the time having these knots, either it's mental or if it's in a ghetto, there might be another safety question. So we all the time have to have these bottoms to address when we're talking about these. We have had a lot of really fantastic response. I've been talking with INTA about this before, and actually we have been very much exchanging ideas in this. But I feel that to have this combination of taking into account the health parameters, but into planning and into convincing politicians and our city municipalities to take it in as a parameter for their maybe urban areas, but also at the edge of the city or in the very center or in the suburban areas. So we will have a toolbox which is actually acting as an inspirational toolbox, kit of toolbox in the future. So I think that was what I would like to share with you. I could talk very long, but I shouldn't do that. Thank you very much.
You are very kind, Helle, but it's a pleasure to listen to you. Before I give the floor to Krista, I would like to draw your attention. It's a personal remark, I would say. I think that we have witnessed in this afternoon something quite strange, that we were moving beyond sustainability. The word sustainability has not been mentioned. Objectives for sustainable development have not been mentioned. I think that is a process which is, you just defined a few minutes ago, Helle, in the sense that we have moved from the very vertical, deep block of policies, which was the mark of the 50s, 70s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and that Frank Schnittman described very, very well by describing the US policy for housing. It is something vertical, very, very huge program, billions of program, but no reference whatsoever to what is next to the program of housing. The Great Society of Johnson is not only housing, but is also social, racial relationship. And that was not, I don't know if it was not treated, it was certainly treated, but it was not presented, it does not qualify, or it does not mark the program. And from that, we went to sustainability, and sustainability, the concept has disappeared because the situation is totally different from the 70s. Another way that has disappeared from our conversation, the concept of smart city has disappeared from the discussion. Nobody mentioned that the solutions is with the technology, with the smart cities technology, as described today in a different sense. And we are moving toward something. We are also moving beyond resilience. It doesn't work. We can see what happened to our society over the last years, to something which has been called, and I don't like the word, but I will use it for the time being, regenerative planning. And that was mentioned by Alexandra. So that is something new, but we are here. The 30 people who were participating to the discussion, we are seeing something which is changing. The way we address the issue of post-COVID is non-traditional, and the traditional conventional solutions were not proposed by you. So that is something that we are opening, something that I hope that we can work together on this line and go a bit further into the discussion along this change in the planning process. Fernando, would you like to say something before we ask Krista to summarize the discussion?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think it was quite interesting, the different points of view, and since the first part and then now, I totally agree with what Helle is just telling us, that what the pandemics show us in a very clear way is that we have to both work in a more integrated vertical way, but also in a more integrated horizontal way. And we are always talking in these two things, and I think that this is quite obvious now. That for one side we need some governmental support for the development of public policies very robust to tackle with unemployment, to tackle social needs, to tackle with health service and things like that. It's not possible to do that without a very strong central government support, or even for transport and mobility. Robert Olivier is putting the things in a very, very clear way, and I think that in the French part of our Congress that will be also a very important issue, because if we want to reduce car impacts and car use, etc., we have to improve in one way proximity, and with all of what that means. But in another way, we have also to improve very attractive and very different kind of transport, because we have used to plan transport to response to mass demand, and now and very concentrated in the certain axes and in certain areas of demand. And now this demand, still a mass demand, but is much more dispersed, and that brings very, very, very huge and complicated problems, even technological problems to the transport. So what I mean is that we have to face this kind of engagement from bottom up and and top down at the same time, and that means that we have, and Marie puts that in a very, very comprehensive way. I think that we need new platforms of governance, and these platforms can coexist with each other. For a certain kind of problems, we have to work in a metropolitan level. Another kinds is a more district level or intermunicipal level, and all these things could be working at the same time, even if they don't work together all the time. What I mean is by that, and that means that our administrative structure must be changed or thinking in another way. And how to do that? How to do that transition? I think that is one of the biggest problems that we have to face, because we are used to work on that at least after Second World War, when public policies have a huge increment, a huge development, and all of them are very sectorial, and now we need to work on it. Another aspect that I think is quite interesting is that we are much more asked to respond to the existing city, at least in the north part of Earth. In the south is The deep south is different, but in the north, we are facing much, even more. I think that it was already there in the 90s, but even more we are facing with the acting in the existing stock of the urban spaces than in the development of new urban spaces or new alternatives to the existing city. As Idoia have put it in a very clear way, and others, in the first time, the idea to the response of the COVID crisis was to move out of the cities, move out of dense areas, go to the countryside and things like that. And even the real estate market go up in small towns and in the rural areas, because LC people thought that if they move there, they will be safe and things could going on. And after 1.5 years, people understand two things. First, we are a social animal. We need to touch, we need to feel, we need to see. More than see, we need to have all the sense together. To see each other is not enough. We need more than that. And that is only possible in our cities. Secondly, is there where is the innovation, is there where is the capacity, is there where is the ability and the skills to face all the problems, health problems and all the others. Is not in a small communities, is in these huge communities that after that can be replied to a smaller scales, but the innovation and the response is made at a larger scale. And that is very clear also for everybody. And secondly, we also see that we could use the existing urban space in a very different ways. And the ideas from Robert Olivier to Lisandro and show us, and even for Paula and from Alexandra, show us how can we transform the existing stock for a more healthy environment. And that is interesting because when we talk about this idea of health environment, you put inside this concept all the problems that we are facing before: sustainability in terms of environment, resilience in terms of facing the climate change and everything else, and health in terms of more general or more common terms. So when you talk about healthy environment, you touch the different aspects: the environment, the social, the economy, the psychological, and the physical environment. And I think that we have to be linked to these new ideas, because after this time, people understand that to have a better life, you have to respond to all these different aspects. You cannot respond one by one. You have to integrate them, and you have to have a common proposal for your future of your community. I think that will take us to other kind of discussions, and very much about politics, and very much about how people deal with these questions. And I think, for example, the huge people that don't vote in the recent French elections, and what we have also in Portugal, that more than 60% of people are not voting anymore. That puts a lot of issues to also see what we call governance, but is not only governance, is also how we structure the links between elected people and the people that elect them and how they work together. That is another issue, but I think that we will come to that sooner than later. And thank you very much for your contributions. It was very, very, very interesting. And I think we have very good aspects to come with.
Mr., would you like to have the last word?
Yeah, I think that this will not be really an easy piece. I think Fernando did an excellent summary of the day. So I don't know what has to be said after that, but maybe I will add some small comments. You know, when I wrote the national policy for architecture in Sweden, I formulated some kind of perspective, and that perspective includes very much the perspective of health. And I consider that health and well-being is very good anchor points to discuss spatial structures, because as you have said, many of you, it includes everything. And what you said, Helle, about culture, I mean, culture is really the glue between people, you can say so. And culture is extremely important. I would also say that Idoia said something about governance and leadership, political leadership. There is a lack of brave, bold political leadership today. And we are really longing for this. And that's why I say that we can't be convinced that we will be successful in solving the climate question, because we are lacking political leadership. And if we don't have a democratic system, we can't solve the climate question. They are so connected, in my opinion. But I would say that thank you everyone for giving all this perspective. I started with very organized minutes, and if you see it today, now it's like this. So it will be quite difficult to say something organized from this. But nevertheless, I will say that when we are discussing health and well-being, it is a way for us, coming from the planning perspective, it is a way for us to managing the brief. What will architecture and planning make? And that's important for us to consider what will be interpreted to a spatial structure. That's why we have to define the brief very well in this complex situation that we are. And I gladly refer to the SDGs. I like them very much. They are interconnected very strongly, and they also say that no one should be left behind. I like that very much. And also like the European initiative, New European Bauhaus. I think that includes also all the perspectives that we have been discussing today. So when we're discussing well-being and health, we are also putting the people in the center. And that is what it is about, having the people in the center and creating the quality of life. The pandemic has also showed us the importance of the spatial structures, the importance of the neighborhood, the importance of the housing question. And I think this has to be discussed much more, because housing is in fact one of the UN points of UN Declaration of Human Rights. And we have forgotten that, at least in Sweden. We are leaving the housing question to the market, and they will never solve the question. Maybe you are in the same situation in your countries. So I think that someone said it's about generative solutions. That's really, really wise said. It is. And we have to find out what that means. The pandemic also means that the pandemic has questioned quite many things. I mean, the urbanization, at least. You said, Fernando, people are moving out in the countryside. We have a discussion in Sweden and in Europe as well, I think, about the mid-sized cities. And I'm not sure at all that people will return to the big cities, because it is a matter of quality of life. They can live a very easy life in the mid-sized city. So that will be very, very interesting to see what will happen. So I think that INTA have an important role here to helping us all to understand and to find a direction, because it will never be as it was before. You can be quite sure about that. And we will not be sure that we will be successful to solve the climate question. So we have two really, really large challenges in front of us. And it ends up also in the governance question. And I will add to that the question of democracy. And we have to discuss that much, much more. But I stop here with some confusing notes, and thank you all for giving me at least many new perspectives. And the perspectives that you have talked about is reflecting the time where we are working in. And I will say that it's so challenging and exciting to work when we are where we are today. Nothing is really taken for granted. We will see. So thank you very much to you all. Thank you for all the very good presentations. Nice to see you all on screen. Hopefully we can meet each other in the real life next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.